So my name is Abigail Pfeister, Rue, and I'm a professor at Concordia University. My doctorate was in a hybrid of communication and psychology, and my dissertation was actually looking at gender. And curiously, in my years since earning my PhD, I've never taught a course on gender. I do different lectures around town on different materials, but this past spring might be the most fun professional experience I've had, and I taught a course on gender for the first time at Concordia University. And so I thought I would pull just a couple snippets from this 16-week-long, 3 times a week course to talk to you all about some of the latest research in gender. So the idea is that today I'm going to give you an overview, and literally this is an exact lecture. You are my college students. This is exactly what I did in class. And then, so we're going to kind of just do an overview and really more talking about gender differences in communication. That tends to hit some good hot spots with some folks, maybe have some good, interesting conversations with some loved ones after this. And then subsequent weeks, I'll give some more of the specific research and maybe some of the alarming research really on younger females, as in little girls growing up, elementary, middle, maybe high school, and then same thing with boys. So today's more kind of a big picture looking at mainly adult population. So it's interesting when I say I'm a researcher on gender differences, because there immediately becomes this vision of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, we're so different. And while that, I don't know if you ever read that particular book, and it's a lovely, fun read, it is absolutely not scientifically valid whatsoever. And to infer that we're from different planets is ludicrous, because when you look at the human genome, and we're 99+% identical, right, males and females. So we really have so much more in common. And you look at a newborn, and is this a boy? Are these boys or girl? Boy? We're not supposed to know. Unless you open up, of course, their diaper and look at their genitalia. Newborn babies are born with the exact same needs all over the world, regardless of gender, race, etc. And that's by design, because we are so incredibly similar. But there's this phenomenal experience that happens throughout life. It's called neuroplasticity, and it is our mind's way of reacting to our environment, and it neurologically adjusts our brain. So there's no such thing as nurture nature. That's a silly continuum. Doesn't exist. Neuroplasticity says my brain and my biology will change based on what is culturally and parent and caregiving wise happening to me. And so what we notice with little baby brains, where we can't even tell the differences between boy and girls very easily, but when we look at adult brains, they're substantially different. And here's just one little relevant study that's recent that I think indicates the differences of what neuroplasticity might do. So you've got this little beautiful baby, and you don't know if it's a boy or a girl, and then all of a sudden, of course, in the hospital, we do stuff like this, and we make it real clear real fast. We don't want to, if you look at these faces, they're obviously the twins that are very similar looking, but we want to make sure that society knows, no, this is the handsome boy, and this is the beautiful girl. So when we look at newborns, turns out newborns have terrible vision. They can't see anything, everything's blurry. And this is by design. I can imagine the birthing experience is not something you want a good close-up look at. And they can't see anything, right? And then curiously, by design, the first set of distance that is able to come into focus is roughly the 12 to 18 inch range. So newborns start getting that roughly around a month-ish of age. So this particular study, and it's only recent that we're able to do this because of the technology, they can study the pupils as they dilate and as they contract and as they start to get into focus and look at what are newborns looking at. These are kind of blobby little things that can't even have neck control, and they can't see anything. But when they start being able to focus, and by age 3 months, they've gotten pretty good focus, at least in the 12 to 18 inch range, what are they looking at? And it's phenomenal because we think about how we treat little baby newborn girls and little baby newborn boys, and you would think, well, of course we treat them the same, they're newborns. But in fact, we, and I say we as in culturally, caregivers spend a lot more time with face-to-face time with this little girl here. So when this little girl's crying, we're more apt to hold her like this or like this. It's called mutual face gazing. We do a lot of mutual face gazing with infant newborn girls. When this little sweet boy starts crying, he gets a little more of this, a little over the back, a little over the, so look at stuff. He gets balls in his face and squeeze. We put him down in a crib and he gets immobile. So is this testosterone and estrogen at play? Certainly. We'll talk about the implications of those very strong chemicals in our bodies. But is it also caregivers saying, hey boys, and we also shake boys a lot more than little girls. A little boy who's crying gets a little more vigorous. Hey, you're fine, stop crying. And a little girl gets a lot more soothing. So the brain is figuring out early on, okay, I got to respond to my environment, I got to survive in this situation, such that by 3 months of age, 3 months of caregiving. Arguably, a 3-month-old is not a particularly advanced human, but they have looked at this, their pupil gazing, and a little baby boy's ability to recognize face expressions and to even identify that this is a human as opposed to a wall, as opposed to a chair, it's not improved statistically significant at all. A little baby 3-month boy just sort of looks at things at random still. A little baby girl has already improved her awareness of mutual face expression gaze by 400%. So this is not because baby girls have better vision. It's because baby girls are taught, look at the face, understand the face, and this is a trajectory that extends for life. And overwhelmingly, we put a huge emphasis on girls understanding face expressions, emotions, people, relationships. And estrogen really spurs this too. And then testosterone and males, we put a huge emphasis on objects, activities, and future forward thinking. And again, testosterone kind of boosts this. So what I like to point out is that there are absolutely biological differences, clearly, but we fan the flame of these significantly such that neuroplasticity takes over, and you do end up with significant gender differences in adult brains, not necessarily because they were innate, but because we've culturally deemed them so. And we get, of course, as the kids grow older, we get really into identifying. I mean, these little faces are the cutest things, but they look the same, and you have to put the girl, literally label her girl, with the bow and the boy. And as you go on into elementary school age or preschool, I mean, we do lots of labeling, particularly in American culture, of what we think a little boy should do. There needs to be toughness, there needs to be a lot of activity, physicality, rough and play. And with girls, we certainly encourage and see dress up, more feminine, more social skills, doing art projects, spending time alone. Some of this is just some natural tendencies, but a lot of this is how we teach them to be. So that's what we're going to kind of debunk today, and we're going to start with the quiz. Now, it might seem like I've given you, and I'll get my own little sheets of paper out. It might seem like I'm going to reinforce some gender stereotypes by having you raise the pink for the girl and the blue for the boy, and of course I would not do that. Let's just talk about the arbitrary nature of pink and blue. The one color associated with all newborns and all youth for millennial in all cultures around the world was, any guesses? White, and specifically white dresses. One, because there was a sense of purity, right? Free from sin, newborns come. But also, frankly, white could bleach out and any poopy stains, and dresses were a lot easier than pants to deal with. I mean, nobody wants to deal with snaps. So a white dress is what all newborns around the world were always put in, some version of a white dress thing. This whole color introduction identifying of babies is a very recent phenomenon, and I even have a quote here. Where is my little sheet of paper? It's from it was here, now it's gone. It's a quote from the Ladies' Home Journal of 1918, and it says, so this is 100 years ago. And it's saying, hey, mothers, make sure you put your boys in pink, and make sure you put your girls in blue. Because historically, red is a regal, dominant, aggressive, powerful color. And obviously pink is a derivative of red, a softer, babier version of red. Pink would be the natural color you would put a male in because you want your male to grow up with this dominant. And if you think of nature, things that are serene and calm and dainty, the ocean, the skies, are blue. And a derivative of a strong royal blue would be a baby blue. So the first colors ever being introduced, girls were blue, baby blue, and boys were pink. So when did it swap, right? What? And roughly, it really kind of was a mixed bag for a while, but we learned to be able to predict before birthing the accuracy of what the sex of your baby was going to be not until the late 70s. So this is only like 40 to 50 years ago. Did we able to take a pregnancy test and get blood work and say, in a handful of months, you're going to have a boy, you're going to have a girl. And this was not lost on manufacturers and companies and marketing executives and said, we got to sell separate clothing now. Everybody used to just wear gender neutral. You didn't know what you were going to have. You wore whatever your big brother, big sister had. But now we can sell entire sets of nursery materials, clothing items, all pink, all blue. We got to make this a big cultural thing. So really only in the last 40 plus years did they swap and say pink is girl. Nurseries, girl, clothes, girl, pink, 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 boy, boy. This is still recent. So I wouldn't be surprised in 100 years if we're at purple and, and black or whatever, gold. So just to reemphasize that we are constantly morphing our ideas of what we should be as gender and what colors we should associate. So for the sake of this quiz, we're going to go back to more historical accuracy. I've got 6 questions. Don't cheat. Go with your gut. I hope you get every 6 question. I hope you get all 6 wrong. This would be an indication of knowledge, right? This is the only college class I would teach where I tell my students, please get all of your answers wrong. So I'm going to put a question up here. And you're going to determine if more males are likely to do this or more females. If it's more males, you're going to hold up pink, because this is more historically accurate. And if it's more females, you're going to hold up blue. Hold your hand up proudly, and then look around. We're just going to kind of get a visual sense of, do we all agree? Maybe it's a mixed bag. Maybe we're all voting more male or female. And then, of course, I'll give you the correct answer, and you can mentally score yourself. I'm not going to keep track. And we can then see the results afterwards, and I'll give you the research studies associated with it. Sound good? All right. Question number 1 in the blue-pink quiz. Who shows more aggression? And again, pink is boy, blue is girl. This is, I'll qualify, this is an American population, and it's looking at elementary school children. Okay, so looking around, you can see we've got a little more people showing boy, a couple of you showing girl, and here's the correct answer. I was tricking you. I wanted you all to feel really good for the first one. So there's a lot of research on aggression, a lot of research on what causes aggression, and what is interestingly definitely a gender difference in aggression is you have to qualify what type of aggression. And maybe I even heard some mumbling. You're like, that's not fair, I don't even know what to say. So physical aggression is, no surprise, overwhelmingly boy. And did they get it because of testosterone? Possibly, yes. Did they get it because of parenting and caregivers and reinforcement of society's culture saying get out and be physical and beat each other up? Yeah. But verbal aggression, really what they call relational aggression, is overwhelmingly female. So when they do these studies and they look at boys and girls, and they literally just go to elementary schools and they go study them on a playground, and they're looking for conflict. They're looking for where aggression might come into play. And when little boys are together and there is some conflict, I mean, they literally just go push each other. And they might utter something like, bleh, you know, you bleh. I mean, it's so primitive. And it's just physical. And you will see that, of course, with some girls, but not nearly as much. With girls, you'll see things like, I am not inviting you to my birthday party. We are not best friends. Piercingly, physically hurtful. I mean, emotionally super hurtful, really hurt. But you would see it and be like, well, they're playing so nicely. Are they? When we look at differences, how often is a girl likely to physically put contact, in an aggressive manner? It's 8 to 1. 8 to 1, it's males. So girls do it 20% of the time. A girl is punching another girl. So it does happen. It's not like it doesn't happen. We also look at the reverse. How often is a boy to show relational interest? When they looked at elementary school boys, and this is on turn taking, so when you're conversing with someone as opposed to interrupting them or changing the topic, but you're just showing conversational skills, which are really foundational, and you learn a lot of this in elementary school. Listen, respond, stay on the same topic. Girls turn take 20 times better and more thoughtfully than boys. 20 times. Boys interrupt or walk away or just aren't listening, right? So who shows more aggression is a tricky question, and you really have to dig down to which type of aggression. Question number 2. This is for adult populations world over. And they've got all sorts of fascinating research on how you study this. But who falls in love faster? So males or females? Hold up your pink for males, your blue for females. Yeah. I like when I see mixed, right? Okay, all right. So I'm seeing, mainly roughly even. And this, the answer is not even. I'm not going to be nice for all of them. You don't all win here. The answer overwhelmingly is guys. Males have the physical, biological capacity to fall in love faster than females. And I'll explain why. Let me caveat by saying both men and women are equally capable of feeling love to deep degrees, but it's a matter of speed. So this notion that we see purported in media and movies of love at first sight is physically very improbable for females. Might be for guys. And here's why. For millennial, our ancestors have learned that, like, okay, let's say I find a person of the opposite sex attractive, and we have love in the air, and if I'm a boy and it doesn't go so well, all right, fine, I'm moving on to my next tribe and life goes on. If I'm a girl, I could be saddled with 9 months of pregnancy and a lifelong dependent. So there are some serious consequences to an unfavorable love connection for females. So in our brains, we call it the gate, women literally, we have a muted initial experience. When I meet some male that I might be attracted to, as much as lust and attraction might be there, equally is concern, red flag, problem, and they're met 50-50, right? It's like, I do not trust you, I don't know what's gonna happen. Men don't have the gate. They just have the full-on, they've got the full-on sidewalk where they're like, well, this is a pretty good experience, you're pretty attractive, I like you. So when they look at, in the scientific literature, the word for love is limerence. And limerence is a chemical combination. I mean, it's just like studying different, what is depression? We can identify it. When you're looking at brain scans, you can see where different, chemicals of the brain are spread. Limerence, it can be identified. And curiously, limerence, so a highly limeric person, has the exact same chemical composition as someone who has clinical OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So to be truly in love is to be insane. To be truly in love is to compulsively think about someone, to forego your needed capacities of food and sleep and shelter, to prioritize them over you, to put aside things that make for good long-term planning, like, hey, I think I should go to work today. I shouldn't just call in and skip the day and spend it with you. I mean, to be in love is to not make good choices, right? And then thankfully, both brains can get there and both brains habituate to the chemicals of limerence. But when we look at who gets to the limerick stage faster, males world over feel love faster. Who is more likely to be jealous over sexual infidelity? So these are in committed relationships. No one likes them. Boys and girls both hate them. These are adult populations we're studying, world over populations, not just American, boy or girl. All right, you can kind of look around. We're getting real. This is probably the most mixed. Okay, you're even holding them up. I'm not tricking you. I'm for this one. So the answer overwhelmingly is males. And the phrase that is critical is sexual infidelities, and let me dissect. So John Gottman is a really well-respected relationship psychologist. I've spoken on him before when I've talked about marriages. And he, thankfully, instead of just studying, he studies divorce, but instead of just studying how marriages fall apart, he's put together over his life career, 50 years, of a really good relationship marital counseling. And so he himself used to do marital counseling. He's kind of too big for that now, but he puts together all these packets to advise for other marital therapists in different communities. And his critical question he always asks at the beginning before couples come in is, and this is couples who are coming in to see if a marriage can be pulled up and reconciled and satisfactory relationships can continue post-affair. So his first question is, who had the affair and what kind was it? And he's not trying to be nosy, but he's got data to support the differences. And he finds that if it was a woman who had a physical relationship with another male, and let's assume no emotional relationship whatsoever. So let's call it a one-night stand, got, some accident happened, she's in love with her husband, she just had a physical affair. He finds the success rates are much lower. The husband has a very hard time believing in trust, and the relationship can repair. It is exactly the opposite if it was the man who had the physical affair. If the man says, I didn't have any emotional connection to the woman, it was just a physical break of our trust, not an emotional, I want this marriage to work, I'm still in love with you, the success rates are significantly higher. And it's also opposite if it's an emotional, if there's emotions involved. So if the woman feels that the man has had emotional feelings, strong love feelings towards someone else, reconciliation is much lower. And yet if the man felt that his wife had feelings for someone else, it's not near as much of a problem. So what we recognize, and David Buss is a big anthropologist, a relationship anthropologist at UT. He's pretty famous, and he's actually the one who still studies this. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in today's age because women can certainly work and take care of themselves, but it's rooted in our ancestral biology, and it's not changed, which is if a man can't believe that the woman who he is committed to is birthing his children, so if she's having sexual affairs and there's a pregnancy and he can't be certain that that baby is his, he's apt to leave, right? So there's a real breach of, I can't have you having physical relations with other people. You can be in love with them, that's a problem, but we can work this out. A woman cannot have a baby and then the man not love them and be committed to them because he'll just leave. So from our ancestors' perspective, it was a real problem for the man to leave the woman with his child, and it was a real problem for the man to raise another man's child that his wife just had. So this belief is still held true, even though, of course, women can take care of themselves, so can men, but it's still a consistent finding that David Buss travels the world over. He looks at primitive societies, he looks at advanced societies, and he still finds that there is a distinct gender difference when it comes to our feelings of sexual infidelities. Who experiences stronger food cravings? This is adult population. This particular study is an American study. Wow. Look around at this. Right. Just adult males, adult females. This is the most dominant one, and you all are, but a lot of you, correct. It is females. Females, and this is an estrogen phenomenon, not helping us out. So The particular study did something like this. They would say, hi, Vivian, what's your favorite food? And you would tell me?
Chocolate chip cookies.
Chocolate chip cookies. Oh, and then they would literally Google it and bring up a picture of a chocolate chip cookie to torture her. And then they would say, describe it, Vivian. And we would get the female participant, they of course would do this with males as well. We would bring up a picture so it was in your brain, and then we would get you to describe it. And we were trying to make it as real as possible. And they've got brain scans on you, and then they would go, okay, great, quit thinking about it. Do whatever you need to do to quit thinking about it. And then they study what the brain does. And then they do this with the guys. You know, think of your favorite food. What's your favorite food?
Ramen noodles.
Ramen noodles. Oh, and they put a picture of a ramen noodle. And they get you to talk about your favorite last meal of ramen noodle, what restaurant, what flavor, what addings. And they get it all in your brain until you're salivating, and they go, quit thinking about it. And you're like, oh. So then they want to see how well can people rid themselves of lingering thoughts, particularly when it comes to something as base as food. And as it turns out, the men substantially better, not all men, but substantially better than the females were like, they by the way, would remove the picture as well from the television. And they would say, all right, and the guys' brains would go, okay, fine, and they're done. And the guys are thinking about the next event. Testosterone has a phenomenal ability to be forward thinking. Testosterone does not succeed in reflection and backward thinking. Testosterone is a moving forward action. Believe it, yes, testosterone helps us think of the future. It's really helpful to think of the future when you're presently hungry, right? You're just, I'll get it later. Estrogen has a phenomenal capability of rumination, of reflection. You've heard like the women carrying their little black bag of memories, like, I will not forget, and they really can't forget. I mean, it's really stored in their brain. Estrogen helps retain memory. And so when you say, okay, stop thinking about your chocolate chip cookie, we take away the visual stimulant, we stop talking about it, here's what the female brain does. Oh, chocolate chip cookie, oh my God, that chocolate chip, and we crave it even more. It grows in our mind, whereas for males, it shrinks in their mind. This applies to dieting. Males have a substantially higher success rate of dieting. Women do not. This comes to drug and alcohol abuse. When you look at those who are trying to quit substance abuse, males have a much higher rate of actually committing to quitting. Women do not as much. So this is often a testosterone, estrogen frustrating thing for we ladies that just want to give up that chocolate chip cookie. But it's a true gender difference that is, permeates our society here. Who experiences higher rates of depression? And again, I'm looking at an adult population. This particular study is an American study. Ooh, this is good and mixed. You got to vote. Everybody have a vote. Doesn't matter if it's wrong. May they all be wrong. The answer is males overwhelmingly. Oh, sorry, I'm getting this wrong. I'm doing my cards wrong. The answer is females experience greater depression, but males experience much more problematic forms of depression, i.e. suicide, homicide. So women feel depression. Now, the first argument that always comes up is, yeah, well, it's because women are allowed to say they're depressed, right? Culturally, men have been stifled. They haven't been, look back to the baby gazing. We haven't. Absolutely, certainly that's true. However, we thankfully are becoming much more comfortable in society at admitting to and representing and honoring those with mental illness and recognizing that depression is something that all people can be affected by, and there's lots of outlets to seek help. And so what we're finding is that rates of depression are increasing both for males and females in terms of when we look at the data of who's reporting that they have experienced depression. So it's going up. More males are reporting it, but so are more females. In fact, females in their lifetime are more than twice as likely than males to experience depression at some bout. And again, this is an estrogen. Estrogen's a little harder to tweak and get just right. Also, women, there's a wonderful series of books, if you're interested in further research. It's by Luann Brizendine. She is a neuropsychologist. She's a Yale graduate. She has a clinic in San Francisco. She runs hormone clinics. Luann Brizendine, and her two books are called The Female Brain, which has got like 16 chapters, and she goes through from birth to death the hormonal stages of women, literally as they go through different changes with pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, post-pregnancy, menopause, et cetera. And then, of course, after she wrote this bestseller, people said, well, what about the others? So she has The Male Brain, and I kid you not, it's half as long, it's twice as thick a font, and it's like 8 chapters. And she's like, it's just a simpler experience. Because they do not birth children, their biology is much simpler. There's not as much absolutely transforming. So estrogen, being a female, going through all these changes, makes it harder to get it right, get all the balances of the chemicals just right, and therefore more prone to depression, feeling depression. Men have a simpler system, but Why is it that of all the mass shootings we've had, 100% have been done by males? 100%. And I will tell you this, we have a very incorrect expression of what we think depression looks like. When I say a depressed human, most of us imagine someone who is feeling gloomy, sad, maybe crying, maybe wanting to pull away from society in their room. That typically is a very female experience of depression. Males' experience of depression often falls along the lines of irritability, kind of inexplicable anger, just feeling like you're mad at the world. Both can be highly functioning, but one is a lot more resulting in homicides and suicides. So I think as a society, we need to, one, recognize that depression is very common, very real, and yet it looks quite different often in the different sexes. And so we need to be a little more attentive, especially to our awareness of what depressed males look like, because we seem to not include the irritable part, just the sadness part. All right, my last question. Who talks more? And this is looking at adults who are in the workforce. I don't know if that matters at all, but this is an adult American study who are out working, and they looked at all these different professionals. And this is like, wow, it's a sea of blue, which is a couple. Yeah, these are professionals.
Not in life, working.
Yeah, the study was looking in work experiences. So they wanted to know who talks more, looking at like your day-to-day working folks. And y'all are overwhelmingly showing it for you're showing it for females, and the answer actually is both. In this particular study, and I'm going to segue into this, in this particular study, there is, of course, this ridiculous assumption that girls just like, and we're going to get into what really the nuance of that, and that boys are just, sort of these stoic, quiet fellas. But when they looked at, and that's just flat wrong. It's just flat wrong. When we look at professionals in the work environment where communicating kind of just has to happen, probably to get work done, there is a negligible, not even statistically significant difference. The average male and female both speak on a day-to-day work basis a little over 16,500 words. Obviously, there's quite variability depending on what your job is, depending on your rank in the position, but when we average it all out, it turns out males and females are both capable of communicating because it's a necessary component of work, and we do not need to think that women are talking more on a regular day-to-day basis, but what I'm going to shift into is why we communicate, and our free time as a social experience, why that is actually quite different. But what we spend our professional time doing, it's not very different. So Deborah Tannen is a scholar. She's written tons of great books. One of them is called You Just Don't Understand, and that's one where she's looking at linguistic differences in males and females. She's out of Georgetown University, and she uses the phrase, women use words and phrases and speaking with an effort to match and show togetherness. So they're not necessarily matching in clothing, although they do that too, but they're almost verbally trying to mimic this, right? So if you're speaking and I'm going to be tracking along with you going, oh yeah, oh yeah, uh-huh. And our intonations and style of speaking are highly contagious. As if any of you have, perhaps like a teenage daughter and she goes off with her friends and she comes back and she's like, oh my God, and you're like, you didn't talk like that yesterday. I know when I was teaching college in the onset of Grey's Anatomy, the television show came out, and if any of you followed this, they brought in the phrase seriously, which actually did not follow anything that was serious. It was just a silly misnomer word, and they would just say seriously, and so all of a sudden all these people were using the word seriously. I teach an advanced public speaking class, and we look at historical speeches, and we study like all the great speech makers of the world, and then we try to implement some of those practices into present day, some really impressive debating, and of course I will not stand it when I hear it just kills your fluency. And the students will always say, oh, I can't help it. I can't think of what to say next. And I say, oh, please, trust me. I could do the brain scans, but I can promise you, your brain is already thinking of the next thought. Your brain is in great shape. It's not a brain issue. It's you're being influenced by your peer group. You're around people that say, you can stop it. And we play games and we monitor it. And overwhelmingly, they all make if not completely stop, a huge decrease in their disfluencies. It is a bad habit is what it is, that you're highly influenced by, particularly females, because they're trying to match in tone and intonation and in conversation length, whereas the male's style of speaking is more of what we call the topping, as in I'm going to top my story. I look at these fellows who just went fishing and they're showing the size, or they're talking about their golf, and they're friends, they're having a great time together, but it's topping. And then I look at these fellows who are out to enjoy guy time and are shoulder to shoulder looking at probably, a television, watching some sports. Both are having a great time communicating. It's just a different style. So the two categories that Deborah Tannen uses to identify what these styles of speaking are connection, competition, or she calls it rapport and report talk. So she gives a classic example. When she was at Georgetown University and she shows up to work a faculty meeting, and there is a female faculty member who comes in running late and says, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. There was this terrible wreck. It took me so long to get around. Oh, yeah, and she starts describing it. And one of the female colleagues hears this dramatic story and says something to the effect of, oh, the same thing happened to me, 2 years ago when I was in this other place. And the woman is looking to show togetherness and connection. I hear you, I connect with you, I'm going to give you. The males are talking the similar amount. The male colleague comes up, but his tone is more like, that was nothing. Here's what happened to me. He's still sharing, he's still connecting, but more in a topping, independent, competitive way as opposed to a connecting, I want to match with you exactly on your way. So she looks at these linguistic choices to convey the same story, but just starting it and putting it in a different frame. So like I said, her two categories that she calls women use talk for rapport building. It's just defined as using talk to establish relationships and build bonds. And that would be what she categorically says what females are doing, whereas males are doing reporting talking more often, which is to establish their status and give information, to really relay details. And there are a couple studies that were not part of hers, but I just put them under here because they're relevant, that kind of get to this. I'm more in the psychological realm of studying, so in communication and psychology we tend to do smaller groups and one-on-one or survey results, but then if you know much about sociological research, it's trying to get thousands of people on huge national or cultural or international patterns. So in this particular sociological study, they sent out a survey to thousands and thousands of people, and they were looking at lots of different things. But one particular question they asked was for every person who was filling out the survey to think of their same-sex closest friend for whom there was no, it was purely platonic. So they're trying to get it just a true friendship of your same sex. And then they said, why? What defined this person? So when I think of my best friend, it's Erin. I met her when I was studying abroad in Australia in college. We've never lived in the same town. So when I define my best friend, it's not about being near her. She lives in Denver, but we talk all the time. And even if we don't talk, I'm caught up on every minutia detail of her life. And we try to see each other as often as we can, but I'm not even around her very much. So to me, what makes her my best friend is the quality of our conversation. She gets me. I get her. We talk about everything. And this result would have been very similar to what many of the females in the sociological study reported. To enjoy a friendship with someone, to enjoy intimacy, to feel connected with anyone, and this is not even, this is sexual relations aside, is to converse, it's to really feel heard. And when they did this study with the males, and when they looked at the males who filled out the results, what makes this your dearest friend, why did you pick this fella, the guys were overwhelmingly likely to say, well, I play golf with him every Sunday. We're building a model car together. He's the one that I can go and, go hunting together with. And it was very activity-based. It's not to say women don't like activities or that men don't like conversations. It's just that we like them, enjoy them in different proportions. So here's another study that's a little more lighthearted, and I question the scientific validity, but it gets to the good point. So they went to, they never tell you in the studies, but they went to a large southern university that has a strong sorority and fraternity system. And they wanted to get sororities and fraternities because they wanted to get a bunch of college students, who of course they gave extra credit to participate in the study. They wanted to get a bunch of college students who live together and see each other all the time, such that novelty was not an issue, that you don't need to oh, I haven't seen you in so long, what's going on? It was just day in, day out. So they gave them extra credit, and I'm sure, maybe a couple dollars, and said, okay, on this Saturday, and they set up a room, and they put chairs and food, and made it as comfortable as could be, and said, okay, all of you girls who live together, sorority girls, I want you to come down here, you'll get extra credit and money, and just stay and talk until you are psychologically satisfied, whatever that means. And then the only request is you could at most stay 24 hours, and probably you wouldn't stay that long because you might want to do other things, but as soon as you finish talking, just don't talk to the people in this room for the rest of the day. So sort of get it all out of your system, if you will, and then go about your day. And they just want to know if all you could do was sit and talk. There's nothing in the room beyond food and chairs, etc. How long do you think the average college girl stayed to talk? 24 hours, 6 hours, 8, 12. Girls like to do other things than talk. The average girl stayed 4 hours. It was just fun, just to sit and do it. Guys are as equally capable of talking, but for girls, they just wanted to for 4 hours. Then they, of course, went to the fraternity house, similar setup. Guys, all you can do is sit and talk, have some food. How long did the average guy?
Depends how much food.
Yeah, depending on how much food.
Yeah.
And again, once you finish talking, don't talk with these folks. Is there a game on television? The average guy, 15 minutes. And they enjoyed it. They had a good time. They just kind of were like, let's go do something. So Deborah Tannen likes to remind us that for women to feel connected, they need to talk. Estrogen, rumination, disclosure, it really builds intimacy. But for men, they certainly like talking. On a professional level, they do it just as often. So that's why the data gets really skewed, because they say women just talk so much. Well, actually, what population are you studying? Are you studying only women in their social time on a Saturday? Probably. But not when you necessarily look in family dynamics, certainly not in professional. So you have to be mindful of what group are you studying. And she also gives great advice on dating or marriage or enjoying some romantic companion, or even Mother's Day and Father's Day, she points out. If there's ever a situation where you want to honor the opposite sex, so if I am a woman and I really want to make Blake feel special, maybe being like, hey, Blake, let's go out and talk about our relationship. Maybe that's not what's going to work for him, right? Maybe on Father's Day, I should be like, hey, let's go do an activity. You get to pick, and then maybe we can talk. Whereas for Mother's Day, call your mom. Let her talk, right? Take your wife out and let a conversation be had. So these are truthful stereotypes that women enjoy talking typically more than males, but both are equally capable of talking and both do it at roughly the same ratio on a regular daily basis. So I'm going to wrap up, and then I'm going to give us a few minutes for discussion. In the gender research, and this was my kind of just big picture, what's going on, we've really changed a lot. I mean, we're constantly morphing not only the colors we use to represent males and females, but our American ideologies about what we should be and how this really changes the brain via neuroplasticity. And I use this Norman Rockwell picture because to me it really explains the traditional male-female role, which was very distinctly separate, particularly in the 30s and 40s. The girls were raised to look pretty and to be quiet and to be attractive. And boys, of course, don't even have their shoes on. They're outside, be rough and tumble, be fishing. And that's not how we are, thankfully, anymore. It was a pretty rigid stereotypes of how one should raise a child if they were male or female. Where we are now is decidedly better for one gender than the other. And this is what I'm going to get more into on the next couple weeks. For females, we have really done a lot of busting open the seams of limitations on who they can be. And I want to emphasize this has nothing to do with sexual orientation or identity. We look at this girl and think, wow, go get him, right? You're the quarterback of the football team. That's not even newsworthy anymore. Maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it would make the headlines, girls start, and now it's like, oh, it happens frequently enough. Certainly, we've done major changes in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which we'll talk about more in the next few weeks. Women are busting through in every single science, technology, engineering, and math degrees, college degrees, graduate degrees, medical degrees, advanced degrees, you name it. So we've done and we needed to. I mean, women certainly didn't have that option before, and now young girls have phenomenal options. So in terms of what we change, of what we allow in our society, women can really still be quite feminine, but they can also be what would be traditionally masculine, and we don't think much about it. But let me tell you what we're not nearly as good at. I can't even tell you how long it took to find a photo like this. Never mind the racial going on, but just a young boy holding a bottle, feeding a baby. It is incredibly healthy for all little children, boy or girl, to practice mimicking nursing. Holding a baby and carrying it around. That's an important skill. It is not wussy. It does not make this boy turn out to not be an attractive male who's got some nice competencies later on. I look at this image, and when we think of a guy playing sports, I mean, it's a fairly narrow spectrum. I don't know if any of you have tried ballet. Really hard. These are incredible athletes, but it does still cause us to go, oh, right? We don't see as many options for fellows, particularly the young ones, about what they can be without getting a little bit of kind of whiplash about, I don't know if I think that's the right behavior to have. So I use, of course, my kids. I've got 3 little boys. Blake and I have a 5, 7, and 8-year-old. And artistic expression should be happening, of course, for all children. There's tons of research that says artistic expression. And even if they go and raid your clothing box and maybe embarrass you a little bit, all kids enjoy and benefit tremendously from imagination, creativity, costumes. And this it should not have any implications about what their later life is going to turn out like. So, you know, we professors like to think, you know, we really know a thing or two as doctors, but I think Dr. Seuss knows the most. Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So in our last, 5, 10 minutes, I want you to turn to just maybe the 2 or 3, 4 people around you, whatever is a comfortable little discussion space. And I'm going to put up these 3 questions. And if you want to go through each of them, great. If you just want to pick one that you find most interesting and discuss, but hopefully you can not just hear, because I don't like just straight lecturing in class. Normally I would have a little longer. We'd break into activities and such, but I like to apply and connect to your own personal lives. So pull off in your small groups and go through these questions, and then we'll share a little bit at the end before we head out. So we've just got 2 minutes left until our official hour is over. And as a good college professor, I never go past the bell because the students will leave you anyway. So with our final 2 minutes, I wanted to see if any of y'all had some aha moments or some thoughts that you wanted to share, and then I'll give you my last thought. So just wanted an opportunity for anyone in your small groups who came up with, heard something or said something that they really thought would resonate and it might be beneficial for the whole group to hear. Maybe related to these questions, or maybe just some discovery or thought you had on your own. Yeah? Yes. And the way to hold you baby. I mean, let's just take the big picture of how we treat small boys, not even just newborns, right? So you just take it to 8. Look at a little 2-year-old boy and a little 2-year-old girl. I mean, overwhelmingly across, boys are treated by caregivers more rough. They're told to stifle their emotion, go to your room and cry it out, as opposed to let me sit here and talk with you. I mean, we are teaching, as a large group, regularly are teaching little boys emotion expression is not something that we value in you. We actually prefer you to stiff face it. Therefore, we actually don't need you to notice my expressions. And this is not their natural biology. This is just what we're forcing them to do. And then with little girls, we're much more apt to hold them, hug them, touch them. We literally are physically rougher with little boys. I mean, I'm talking like 6-month-old babies. Like we'll just, even when they're playing, we'll throw them higher, woohoo! We'll put them in the chair more, whoa, it's very scary. So we give little boys constant physical stimulations and not much relational reminders. And we give girls constant verbal, relational, facial reminders and cues and not as much stimulation. This happens all through childhood.
Like you're nursing a baby, and rather than, booing and of the baby, that you might be checking the Facebook page or searching, something, whatever.
Yes, I would not say that has any gender difference, but yes, I would say society in general, and I do a whole unit on mindlessness, we call mindlessness, typically, social media, cell phones being, or whatever, computer being the distraction, but it could be anything. So yes, mindlessness is a major crisis that's coming, just not clicking and attending. Yeah,
so
yeah.
We had talked about in one of our other classes with you about like the 5 apocalypses
Yeah.
of marriage.
Yeah.
And stonewalling is,
Yes.
men tend to stonewall more. Do you think that perhaps that we contributed to that when, as we're handling
You
baby
betcha.
boys?
Do I think
Right.
boys can be as attuned to emotions as girls? Absolutely, without a doubt. Estrogen still thinks about rumination. Testosterone is still going to make us think about the future and forward and action, but that does not preclude one from being sensitive on emotion or preclude one from being tough and able to think about the future. I think we play into it and don't develop it, but we're really adaptable. The wonderful thing about humans is we're phenomenally willing to accept our environment and adjust, and we are really impacted by those around us and how they teach us how to be. So what I want to dig into, and again, I taught this whole course and I just don't even know what to narrow down, but I'm going to focus more. There's some really interesting research about particularly more our young children. When I say young, I mean like maybe 15 and under, maybe even 10 and under. So we're going to look at what's going right, kind of the changes in parenting styles, the changes in teaching styles, the changes in kind of cultural ways, and particularly now that our millennials are having children, and this is really quite a generational difference. So we're going to focus on, hey, these are differences in way they've been raised over different decades, but then also we're going to look at some maybe really alarming things that are just now hitting Congress and just now hitting school districts and just now hitting areas to really put some attention to, and we will be hearing about these for 20 plus more years to come until we correct for them. So alarming and exciting things. That's what we'll be digging into in the next couple weeks. I hope to see you then.
Thank you, Abigail.
Yeah.